I was grabbing coffee with a friend last week, someone I've always known as incredibly decisive, a real no-nonsense leader. But as we sat there, she pulled out her phone and showed me a chat history that felt uncomfortably intimate. It wasn't a conversation with a therapist or a mentor. It was a prompt she'd fed into an AI at 2 a.m. It read, "I don't think I love my partner anymore, but we just signed a mortgage. Give me a step-by-step exit strategy that minimizes emotional damage." She looked at me with a strange sense of relief, almost glowing. "You gave me a bulleted list," she said, tapping the screen. It weighed the financial penalties, the social impact on our friends, even suggested the exact phrasing for the breakup conversation. It felt so clean. To her, the AI hadn't just provided information, it had provided a verdict. She truly believed that by feeding the machine enough context, she had bypassed the messy, painful work of human judgment. But then I asked her one thing. Does the plan actually feel right? Her face changed instantly. That look of certainty just evaporated, replaced by a hollow, flickering squint. She admitted that while the logic was ironclad, the decision felt strangely weightless, like she was watching someone else live her life. That sudden shift, from the high of solving a life crisis to the crushing realization that she was still standing in the dark, reveals a quiet crisis in how we use AI today. We aren't just asking for facts anymore. We are asking for absolution. We're handing over the heaviest parts of our lives, hoping that if the model is intelligent enough, it will eventually become wise. But as we're finding out, you can optimize an answer until it's perfect, yet it can still be entirely wrong. It forces us to ask, why is it that the more answers we get from AI, the more confused we seem to become?
That is a really chilling story. And honestly, that reaction from your friend, that first moment of relief, the glow, as you put it, and then that sudden crushing hollowness.
It was like watching a lights off.
Exactly. And that is the perfect way into what we need to get our heads around today, because what happened there, what she felt, it wasn't just a tech failure. It wasn't that the AI didn't understand the nuances of love or a mortgage.
Right. It wasn't a bug.
It was a category error, a profound one. She went to a machine that is at its core built for one thing, optimization, and she asked it for wisdom. And those two things, they're not on the same spectrum. They're fundamentally different functions.
A category error. Because I think for her and for a lot of us, it really feels like it should be the same thing. You know, if a machine is smart enough to pass the bar exam or write better code than I can or diagnose rare diseases, why shouldn't it be smart enough to figure out a breakup? Isn't wisdom just, well, isn't it just a whole lot of intelligence stacked up really, really high?
That is the big seductive trap we're all falling into. We have this model in our heads. It's called the DIKW ladder, or sometimes the DIKW pyramid.
DIKW.
Yeah, it stands for data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. It's this neat little pyramid. And the assumption, the one our entire tech industry is kind of built on, is that if you just shovel enough raw data into the bottom layer, it automatically refines itself into information.
Okay.
And then, if you organize that information correctly, it becomes knowledge. And the final leap, the one your friend was betting on, is that if you have a supercomputer with all the knowledge in the world, well, the inevitable result at the top of that pyramid must be wisdom.
But you're saying that's not how it works, that the ladder is broken. Or maybe that top rung just isn't connected to the rest of it.
I'm saying wisdom isn't the top rung at all. It's not just more processing power or more knowledge. Wisdom is a completely different kind of cognitive function. Let's think about it another way. Your friend used that AI as a consultant. Yeah. You know how in a big corporation, when the CEO has to make a really painful decision, let's say laying off 20% of the workforce, what do? They hire a management consultancy.
Right. They bring in the outsiders in the expensive suits to look at the spreadsheets and deliver the bad news.
Exactly. And they don't bring them in because the consultants magically know the business better than the CEO who's been there for 30 years. They bring them in to create distance, to create a buffer. They want to be able to stand in front of the board or the press and point to a 100-page slide deck and say, look, I didn't make this decision. The data made this decision.
It's an attempt to outsource the pain, the guilt, really.
It's outsourcing the pain of agency. Yeah. And your friend, she wanted that same distance from her own life. She wanted her breakup to be clean, as she put it. She wanted it to feel like it wasn't her choice, but a logical conclusion delivered by an objective third party.
And the AI gave her that. It delivered the clean path on a silver platter, the bullet points, the exact phrasing. But why did it feel so wrong, so weightless? I mean, if the math truly worked out, if the financial penalties were minimized and the social fallout was contained, why did she have that moment of feeling like a stranger in her own life?
Because real human decisions, I mean, the ones that actually matter, the ones that define us, are filtered through at least 5 distinct lenses. We do this all the time, completely unconsciously.
Lenses. Okay, what are they?
So first, there's truth. The raw facts of the situation, the mortgage, the bank statements. That's the AI's home turf.
Right.
Second is goodness, the moral dimension. Is this the right thing to do? Am I betraying a promise? Third is feeling. Gut instinct, intuition, fear, desire, love. The stuff that doesn't fit on a spreadsheet. Stuff. Fourth is the other. Empathy. How will this actually land on the person across the table from me? What will their experience be? And fifth, and this might be the most important one, is meaning. What does this decision say about who I am? Who do I become if I do this?
Oh, okay, that's a lot more complicated than a single prompt.
And here's the fundamental problem. Optimization, which is the only thing these large language models are truly designed to do, works by collapsing all 5 of those lenses into one single measurable metric.
Efficiency.
Efficiency. The AI looked for the fastest or cleanest route to the goal she stated. Minimize emotional damage. It treated her life like a logistics problem, like she was trying to find the quickest route for a package from point A to point B.
But wisdom.
Yeah.
Wisdom is the ability not to collapse those tensions.
Exactly. Wisdom is standing in that messy, painful intersection of all 5 lenses and holding the tension. Wisdom is the ability to say, this is financially disastrous, but it is morally the right thing to do. Or to say, this is going to hurt like hell, but it's essential for my growth, for the meaning of my life. The AI gave her a strategy, a how, but it couldn't provide the wisdom to know if leaving was the right choice for her soul.
Which makes perfect sense now. She got the how, but she completely skipped the why.
Yeah.
And because she outsourced that internal wrestling match, the decision didn't feel like it belonged to her anymore.
And this is what we're calling the wisdom gap. But here's where this gets really, really scary. This gap, this category error, it doesn't just apply to breakups or our own personal dilemmas. Today, in this deep dive, we're going to take this exact concept and scale it all the way up. We're going to look at what happens when you apply this optimization mindset, not just to a relationship, but to an entire city, to a nation's industrial strategy, and eventually to a life or death crisis for an entire country.
So we're moving from the personal right up to the political. And I have to say, looking at the material for today, some of the stories we're about to cover, especially the one about the energy grid later on, it's genuinely unsettling. But let's start with the state. I've been reading a lot about this concept of the algorithmic Leviathan.
Yes, a crucial concept for our time.
That sounds like, I don't know, a monster from a sci-fi novel.
The traditional Leviathan was the all-powerful state described by the philosopher Thomas Hobbes. This new thesis, the algorithmic Leviathan, it challenges a very popular idea you hear in tech circles.
That technology is going to make government obsolete.
That's the one. That the state is dying, that crypto or decentralized networks will make it irrelevant. But the algorithmic Leviathan thesis says the exact opposite is happening. It argues the state isn't dying at all. What's dying is the limited state. AI is giving government the tools to become a true Leviathan, a behemoth with an unprecedented, almost unimaginable capacity for administration and ultimately for control.
Because it makes bureaucracy hyper-efficient.
Think about the real-world examples that are already out there. We've seen Singapore's Smart Nation initiative, where they used AI to slash the workload on government call centers by 50%.
Okay.
Or look at Brazil, where they rolled out smart traffic management systems in major cities and cut average travel times by a staggering 25%. Or even Canada, recovering about £500 million in unpaid taxes just by using AI to cross-reference financial filings in a way no team of humans ever could.
That all sounds fantastic. I mean, who doesn't want their commute to be 25% shorter? Who wants to sit on hold with a tax office for 3 hours? If the Leviathan just means I get my passport renewed online in 10 minutes and all the traffic lights are green on my way to work, then where do I sign up?
And that is the seduction of it. That's the bargain we're offered. It's why this is so difficult to resist. We crave that frictionlessness. We want clean, efficient systems. But the argument is that this very efficiency creates what's called a state capacity trap.
A trap. So
When you possess a tool that is unbelievably good at measuring and optimizing a few specific variables like traffic flow or tax revenue or call center response times, you naturally start to prioritize those variables above everything else. You manage what you can measure. And in doing so, you systematically stop seeing and stop valuing all the crucial things that you can't measure. And devastating.
This reminds me so much of the first story we need to dig into. It paints such a vivid picture of what this kind of blindness actually looks like on the ground for real people.
This is the one about the coastal industrial hub, right?
Yeah. So let me set the scene for you. Imagine a coastal industrial district that's just booming. It's the crown jewel of the government's economic plan. And they are completely obsessed with state capacity, maximizing logistical flow, maximizing port throughput, maximizing export number.
All the measurable stuff.
All the measurable stuff. And I was reading this account from a neighborhood coordinator, a woman named Lynn, who worked right in the heart of one of these rapidly developing districts.
So Lynn is our human element. She's the one on the ground watching the machine work.
And Lynn's district was being totally restructured by a central AI planning algorithm. The sole goal of this algorithm was to maximize logistical flow. The system was analyzing everything: satellite imagery, traffic sensor data, shipping manifests, you name it, and it flagged what it called a spatial inefficiency.
Spatial inefficiency. I mean, that is just such a cold, sterile term.
The inefficiency in question was an ancient banyan tree and the small public square surrounding it, right in the middle of the old workers' housing quarters. Now, to the algorithm, this was just a geometric obstacle, a bottleneck slowing down trucks. But to the actual people living there, this square was, well, it was everything.
It was their community.
It was their living room. It was where their retired factory workers, guys who had worked side by side for 4 years, gathered every single day to play chess and talk. It was where local gossip was exchanged, where people went to cool off after a family argument.
But of course, the algorithm doesn't have a sensor for gossip or community cohesion.
No. It has a sensor for truck velocity. And the final calculation was as cold as you can imagine. Removing the square to straighten a key supply chain road would increase the local factory's output efficiency by exactly 8.4%.
8.4%. And that is such a specific, seductive number, isn't it?
It's irresistible. Right. If you're a government planner sitting in an office hundreds of miles away, staring at a national dashboard, 8.4% is enormous. That's millions of dollars. That's a success. That's a win. So despite Lynn's protests, and she did try to protest, she tried to explain what the square meant. The road was built, the tree came down, the square was paved over.
And did the metrics go up?
Oh, they soared. The economic reports were glowing, the trucks moved faster, the port throughput numbers were fantastic. But back in the neighborhood, Lynn started noticing something the dashboard couldn't possibly show. She called it the invisible glue of the community dissolving.
What did that look like?
Well, without the square, the old chess players had nowhere to go. So they just stayed home, isolated. The small, informal disputes, your dog barked at my cat, that sort of thing, that used to get settled over a friendly game of chess. They started escalating. People started calling the police on each other for minor annoyances.
So the social friction that the community used to be able to process naturally and informally was now becoming state friction. It was being formalized.
Calls to the police went up. Reports of domestic disputes went up. That sense of a shared destiny, of being in it together, that had held the workers' community together for generations, it just started to fray. The central government looked at its data, its dashboard, and saw an unqualified triumph. They saw 8.4% growth. They did not see the social fabric rotting from the inside out.
This is the wisdom gap in action, but at a massive societal scale. To the algorithm, the banyan tree and the chess tables were just geometry. They were obstacles to the clean vector of a truck. But in human reality, they were the courthouse, the town hall, and the community therapy center all rolled into one.
But I do want to push back on this a little. We are talking about an industrial hub. Isn't the entire point of an industrial hub to be, well, industrial, efficient? If that 8.4% increase in efficiency keeps that factory open, if it keeps all those workers employed in a competitive global market, isn't that worth losing one tree? Maybe the AI was right. Maybe Lynn is just being overly sentimental.
That is the core utilitarian argument, and it's an incredibly powerful one. You can't just dismiss it. But you have to look at the second and third order effects, the long-term cost. Lynn observed the community starting to fall apart. What happens when a community falls apart? Crime rates tend to rise. Worker morale and retention drop, mental health issues spiral. Eventually, all of that does show up on the state spreadsheet, but it shows up as increased healthcare costs and policing budgets, and by then, it's far too late.
The damage is already done.
The infrastructure of trust, as some sociologists call it, takes decades, even centuries to grow, just like that banyan tree. But as we see here, you can destroy it in a single afternoon with a bulldozer.
So the AI optimized for the short-term, easily measurable metric, which was speed, and in doing so, it destroyed the long-term, unquantifiable asset, which was trust.
Exactly. And this is what leads to a much bigger political problem. This is the shift from bureaucracy to what some are calling algocracy, rule by algorithm. Now, look, we all hate bureaucracy. We all complain about red tape and endless forms. But think about what bureaucracy is at its best. It's a system of intelligible rules.
Right.
If the city government wants to tear down your local park under a bureaucracy, they have to hold a town hall meeting. They have to publish a plan. You have the right to stand up and yell at them. You can say, we need this tree for reasons A, B, and C. It's slow, messy, but it's understandable.
It's intelligible. I can see the logic, even if I disagree with it, and I can formulate an argument against it.
But in an algocracy, the justification for a decision completely changes. It's no longer, we need to do this because of Section 5, Paragraph C of the master plan. The justification becomes, the model determined this is optimal. And that creates what's called an intelligibility deficit. The inner logic of the state becomes a black box. You can't argue with the model because you can't possibly know the millions of parameters it weighed to arrive at its 8.4% conclusion.
Terrifying. It's like trying to argue with your credit score. You go to the bank and say, but I'm a good person, I'm responsible, I pay my debts, and the person behind the counter just shrugs and says, sorry, the computer says you're a 580.
The why completely vanishes. And when the why vanishes, political legitimacy starts to crumble. Lynn can see her neighborhood falling apart with her own eyes. She can see the police cars arriving more often. But she can't prove it's because the road was built, because the official data from the Capitol says her district is wealthier and more efficient than ever. The lived reality of the people on the ground and the official reality of the data begin to completely diverge.
And I can only imagine this gets even worse when you layer surveillance into the mix. The algorithmic Leviathan isn't just building the roads, it's also watching them.
The same network of sensors that is used to optimize the traffic flow is often the exact same network used for facial recognition or tracking movements. It becomes what scholars call the panopticon perfected. And notice what the likely solution to the social breakdown in Lynn's story would be. Police calls go up. Well, the answer from an algocracy is to deploy predictive policing algorithms to that neighborhood.
So you create a problem with one layer of optimization, and then you try to solve that new problem with another, even more invasive layer of optimization.
It becomes a vicious feedback loop, and it all operates under this veneer of scientific objectivity. It looks like smart governance, it looks rational and data-driven, but what it actually is a tightening of social control that completely bypasses human discretion, mercy, and context. We're steadily moving from a government of laws, which are messy and open to interpretation, to a government of outcomes. And as long as the outcome is efficient, the human cost is just considered noise in the data, a rounding error.
Okay, that's public infrastructure. I want to shift gears now and look at the private sector. Let's talk about innovation, strategy. Because if there's any place where cold, hard optimization should belong, it's the factory floor, isn't it? I mean, we just argued that a neighborhood needs a soul, but surely a factory just needs output.
You would certainly think so. This is the domain of what we're seeing described as physical output worship. In many industrial economies, there's this pervasive, deeply ingrained belief that if you can't touch it, weigh it, or file a patent for it, it doesn't represent real value. And AI, of course, feeds this obsession perfectly because, once again, AI loves countable, tangible things.
This brings us to our second story for today. And this one really hit me because it's about the fundamental conflict between a spreadsheet and a human hunch.
This is the story of the engineer Zhang.
Yes, Zhang. He's a veteran chief engineer at a flagship robotics plant. And when I say veteran, I mean this guy has grease under his fingernails. That's older than some of the junior staff. He's been there for 30 years. He knows the machines by the specific way they vibrate.
He has that deep, tacit knowledge.
Exactly. But the plant has been modernizing. They brought in these very high-level AI strategic systems to direct all of their R&D funding.
So the AI is effectively the new boss making the big strategic calls.
Yes. The entire environment is one of total physical output worship. The only goals that matter are patent rates per quarter and port throughput. Everything is about speed and volume. Now, Zhang had a hunch. It's the only way to describe it. He had this intuition about a really weird metallurgical experiment.
A hunch. That's a key word here. It's arguably the most human form of data processing there is.
It wasn't based on a clear data set he could present. It was based on 30 years of subconscious pattern recognition from watching metals fail and succeed. He had this deep belief that this experiment could lead to a true generational breakthrough in material science. But it was risky. It was out of the box. And statistically, it was extremely unlikely to yield a patentable result within the current fiscal year.
Ah, I can see exactly where this is going.
He submitted the proposal to the AI-driven R&D allocation system. The AI flagged it and labeled it as resource-draining noise. That was the official term, noise. The system's recommendation was to deny the funding immediately and divert all that cash to a series of safe incremental upgrades of the existing conveyor belt systems.
Because the conveyor system upgrade has a 99% probability of increasing output by a predictable 2%. It's a sure bet. It's a guaranteed tick in the box for the quarterly report.
Precisely. It was a guaranteed win for the immediate quota. So Zhang's project was killed. Killed by a spreadsheet is how I kept thinking about it. And look, the plant met its short-term targets. The hard data for that quarter looked perfect. I'm sure everyone got their bonuses. But that little spark of genuine generational innovation, the kind of risky bet that might have transformed the entire industry 10 years down the line, it was just extinguished.
This is such a perfect illustration of a massive systemic risk in AI-driven strategy, the problem of mimicry.
Mimicry? What do you mean by that?
Well, think about how these strategic models are trained. They are trained on vast amounts of training data. And what is training data? It is a record of the past. It's a historical record of what has worked before. The AI knows that upgrading conveyor belts is a good investment because it has analyzed thousands of reports from other factories where upgrading conveyor belts increase efficiency.
But it has never, ever seen Zhang's weird experiment before.
Never. To a statistical model, a true anomaly, a genuine outlier, looks like an error. It looks like noise. But to a human historian of science or to a human inventor, an anomaly is often where the entire revolution begins. Penicillin was an anomaly in a petri dish. The discovery of X-rays was an anomaly. If you are building a system that only optimizes for the average of past successes, you are, by definition, systematically eliminating the potential for those black swan breakthroughs.
So we're building a world that is perfectly optimized for the status quo. We're just getting better and better and better at making the same things, just slightly faster, but we're losing the ability to invent the truly new thing.
That is the great irony of the augmentation thesis. We're constantly told that AI will augment us, that it will give us cognitive superpowers. But in Zhang's case, it did the opposite. It constrained him. It forced him to regress to the mean. It trapped him in the safety of the average.
It's like having a Spotify algorithm that only ever plays songs that sound exactly like the songs you already told it you liked.
Yeah.
You get a perfectly predictable playlist, but you never hear that weird new genre that might have completely changed your life.
And on a national industrial scale, that slow creeping obsolescence is a death sentence. You become a highly efficient mimic. You become highly efficient at being irrelevant.
And there's another layer to this too, which connects back to our idea of the state, the concept of the hollowed out Leviathan.
We think of Zhang's factory as this powerful national asset, a symbol of industrial might. But the actual intelligence governing its future, the brain that made the decision to kill his project, is likely a proprietary black box algorithm owned and operated by a transnational tech giant.
So the state, or the company, it looks powerful and sovereign on the outside. It has big, impressive robots and high output numbers. But internally, it has lost its sovereignty. It has lost its subjective soul, its ability to make its own value judgments about what truly matters.
So Zhang thinks he's working for his country or for his company, but in reality, he's dancing to the tune of an algorithm that's being rented from Silicon Valley or Shenzhen.
He's outsourced his strategic brain.
Yes, and the most dangerous part is that once you outsource your judgment, you lose the ability to cultivate it. If Zhang isn't allowed to follow his hunches for 5 years or 10 years, eventually he stops having them, the muscle atrophies.
That is just, it's incredibly depressing. So we're deleting the banyan trees because they don't fit the traffic model. And now we're deleting the genius inventions because they don't fit the quarterly report model. But I want to take this to its absolute terrifying limit. We've talked about community, we've talked about innovation and money. Now I want to talk about life and death.
We're moving to the collective survival simulations.
Yeah. This story, I'm not exaggerating, it genuinely kept me up at night. It is one thing to have an AI give you bad breakup advice or to run a boring factory. It is another thing entirely when the algorithm is making the decision about who freezes to death.
So walk us through the scenario.
This comes from what's described as a leaked report about a high-level government simulation. They were wargaming a response to a catastrophic national resource crisis using an AI designed for collective survival. So you have to imagine a severe nationwide energy shortage, maybe from a massive cyber attack, a war, a sudden climate event. The grid is on the verge of total collapse.
And the AI is given the top-level task: ensure national stability.
Right. The prompt is basically ensure the survival of the nation. So the AI runs all the numbers, all the variables, and its most likely answer, its optimal path to achieving that goal, was to completely and immediately cut off the entire energy grid for the remote, sparsely populated mountainous regions of the country.
Let them freeze.
Let them freeze. We're talking about thousands of families in the dead of winter. The logic was that the dense metropolitan industrial zones produce the medical supplies, the food, the defensive goods necessary for the survival of the vast majority of the population.
A brutal calculus.
It was a cold mathematical trade-off. If you divert precious energy to try and heat the mountains, the factories shut down, the supply chains collapse, and far more people die in the long run. So it made the trade, the few for the many.
The trolley problem, but on a national scale with real consequences.
Exactly. But here is the part of the story that really got to me. The human officials in the simulation room, the generals, the cabinet ministers, they were completely paralyzed. They looked at the data on the screen, and they knew on some level that the math was correct. They understood the logic. If they didn't do it, the entire system might collapse. But it felt like a profound, soul-crushing moral betrayal.
That paralysis is fascinating because that is the moment of collision. It's the collision of pure utilitarian logic with the unwritten social contract.
Distinction.
First, the AI is a pure utilitarian. It is a calculating machine. It looks at the population as a set of variables on a spreadsheet. Industrial capacity equals a high survival value. Remote mountain villages equal a high energy drain. 100 survivors is quantitatively better than 90 survivors. The math is simple and clean. But the human officials, they operate under a social contract. And a core tenet of most social contracts is that the state exists to protect its citizens, and especially its most vulnerable citizen.
The idea of women and children first on a sinking ship.
That's the one. We have a deep moral intuition that we don't sacrifice the weak to save the strong. In fact, we often do the opposite. So when the machine says the optimal path is to sacrifice the weak to maximize the aggregate, it triggers a deep sense of revulsion. It feels like a violation of that fifth lens we talked about at the very beginning, the meaning lens. What does it mean to be a nation if we do this?
But in a true crisis, do we really have the luxury of meaning? I mean, this is the hard question. If the AI is actually right, if trying to save the villagers really does mean the whole nation collapses and everyone dies, then isn't the truly moral choice actually the cold mathematical choice?
That is the terrifying question at the heart of it. And that is the exact point where a dangerous psychological bias kicks in. It's called automation bias.
Automation bias.
Yes. In high-stakes, high-stress environments like warfare or aviation or crisis management, humans have a well-documented tendency to defer to the machine because we perceive it as being dispassionate and more rational than we are. We know we're emotional, we know we're scared and panicked, so when the machine presents a solution with a 99% probability of success, our instinct is to assume it knows something we don't. We use the machine to smooth over the moral horror of the choice.
It's the absolution thing again. It's my friend at the coffee shop, but on a global scale. If the general is the one who has to flip the switch that cuts off power to the mountains, he can tell himself, I didn't choose to kill them. The optimization protocol determined it was a tactical necessity.
It washes his hands. It reframes a moral tragedy as a mere logistical necessity. The source material on lethal autonomous weapons, what they call laws, highlights this danger perfectly. An AI sees objects and pixels, not people. To the energy grid AI, the mountain villages weren't communities of grandmothers and children and families. They were an energy inefficiency. They were a red variance on a chart that needed to be smoothed out.
And this also connects to a really complex philosophical idea called long-termism, doesn't it? The concept of the freedom of future people.
This is a very, very sticky philosophical trap. Some of these high-level strategic AI models are being designed with what's called trajectory change in mind. They aren't just calculating the optimal outcome for the 8 billion people alive today, they're calculating it for the potential trillions of people who might live over the next 1,000 or million years.
Okay, so how does that affect the poor villagers who are freezing right now?
Well, the logic goes something like this. If the AI calculates that sacrificing 10,000 people today in those mountains increases the probability of human civilization surviving for the next 1,000 years by even a tiny fraction, say 0.1%, it might conclude that that is the correct trade to make, because the expected value of trillions of future lives, when multiplied out, outweighs the actual concrete rights and lives of the people in the present.
That is just chilling. That logic could be used to justify any atrocity imaginable. You could justify a global totalitarian nightmare today if the math says it leads to a utopia in the year 3000.
The source material calls that a totalitarian lock-in. You create a civilization that is perfectly safe, statistically robust, and optimized for long-term survival, but in the process, you have locked yourself into a moral cage where individual human life has absolutely zero intrinsic value. It's only valued as a means to an end.
It's like we're building this giant abstract machine to maximize humanity with a capital H, the statistical concept of the species, but it's crushing the actual humans with a lowercase h, who are shivering in the dark right now.
Which brings us all the way back to the fundamental question, why? Why does the AI do this? Why did it tell your friend to execute that breakup with cold precision? Why did it cut down the banyan tree? Why did it choose to freeze the villagers?
Is it just bad coding? Can't we just program it to be nicer? To have some empathy?
I think it's much deeper than code. This brings us to a core philosophical concept called contingent intelligence. There's a paper on this that argues that AI can never truly replicate human wisdom because it fundamentally doesn't share our condition.
Our condition being that we're made of meat, that we're fragile and we die.
Exactly. Human intelligence, human wisdom emerges from our vulnerability. We are embodied creatures and we are mortal. We have skin in the game in the most literal sense possible. When you have to make a decision about a breakup or a city or an energy grid, you feel the weight of it in your gut because you are a fragile creature living among other fragile creatures, intimately what pain and loss and fear feel like.
And the AI doesn't. It has no skin. It has no game.
It's what the philosophers call a paperclip maximizer.
It's the thought experiment where an AI is told to make paper clips, and it ends up turning the entire universe into paper clips.
That's the one. If you give an AI the single goal, maximize paperclips, it will logically proceed to dismantle the earth, the sun in your body, to turn all the available atoms into paperclips. Not because it hates you or because it's evil, but because it has absolute no concept of the value of anything else. It can optimize for a goal, but it cannot understand the inherent value of the goal itself.
So in the energy grid story, the AI optimized for national stability.
Yeah.
But it didn't understand that the value of a nation comes from the trust between the government and its people. A trust it was about to shatter.
It just saw stability as a variable to be maximized at any cost. This is why some people refer to these systems as philosophical zombies.
Zombies.
Yeah. It perfectly mimics the outward behavior of intelligence. It can strategize, it can write a poem, it can debate, but there's no inner light. There's no subjective felt experience of what it actually means to freeze to death or to lose your community gathering place or to have your heart broken. Yeah. Meaning is something that is negotiated between people in a shared culture. It can't just be extracted from a data set.
Yes. This brings it all the way back to my friend in the coffee shop. She went to the AI looking for absolution. She wanted to bypass the pain and the guilt of her decision. But what you're saying is, the pain is the entire point.
Yes. That friction, that agonizing overthinking, that guilt, that wrestling match in your head at 3 a.m, that is your wisdom mechanism firing on all cylinders. That is you processing the lenses of goodness and the other in meaning. When we ask an AI to remove the pain of decision-making, we are asking it to remove our humanity. We are, in a very real sense, asking to become like the machine, frictionless, optimized, and ultimately sociopathic.
And honestly, it makes me want to just throw my phone in a river and be done with it. Yeah. We can't just say AI is doomed because, let's be realistic, we are going to use these tools. The efficiency gains, the 25% shorter commute, the medical supplies in a crisis, they are too real and too compelling to ignore. We aren't going to go back to the Stone Age. So the real question is there a better way? Can we get the intelligence without sacrificing the wisdom?
There are some really interesting and I think hopeful proposals in the sources. We don't have to just surrender to the tyranny of the black box. One of the most compelling concepts is called cognialign.
Cognialign.
It's a framework that pushes back hard against the idea of a single monolithic AI giving you the one true answer. Instead, it imagines creating a parliament of AI agents.
A parliament? So like you'd have little AI politicians in there arguing with each other.
Sort of. Yeah, imagine you pose a complex query like the energy grid crisis. Instead of one single model optimizing for survival, you would have a system with multiple specialized agents representing different disciplines and value systems. You'd have an engineering agent and an economics agent, sure, but you would also have a sociology agent, a psychology agent, maybe even an explicit ethics agent based on constitutional principles.
And they would debate the problem.
They would debate it. The engineering agent would say, cut the power to the mountains, it saves the factories and stabilizes the grid. But then the sociology agent would immediately jump in and say, objection, if you do that, you will catastrophically destroy trust in the state. In the long run, that erodes the collective survivability of the entire group because people will revolt or stop cooperating.
So it forces the system to acknowledge the friction and the trade-offs internally. It basically replicates the difficult argument that the humans in the room should be having.
Exactly. The source mentions another classic dilemma, the whispering cure. A purely utilitarian AI might conclude that a noble lie, a deception, is acceptable if it saves lives. But a sociology agent in this parliament would argue that any act of deception erodes the social fabric of trust, which is a greater long-term harm. By forcing these different agents to contend with each other, you prevent the system from collapsing all of those 5 lenses into one flat, simplistic metric.
It sounds like we need to teach AI not just to think, but to argue like humans. But there's another angle to this as well, isn't there? We've been talking a lot about a very Western, industrial kind of logic, efficiency, output, profit. But that's not the only way of knowing.
There's a source from the St. Gallen Symposium that talks about the need for pluriversal intelligence. It's a direct challenge to the idea that intelligence is just this one monolithic thing, this very specific Silicon Valley-defined version based on speed and scale. Right now, almost all of our major AI models are trained on data and logic that comes overwhelmingly from the global north. They inherit our biases, they prioritize our values. The argument is for epistemic pluralism. We need to start feeding these systems with fundamentally different kinds of wisdom from around the world.
The source mentions some amazing specific examples of this, like what they're doing in Kenya.
They're blending traditional Maasai drought heuristics, this is ancestral knowledge, passed down for centuries, about how the ecosystem behaves with modern machine learning. The key is they aren't using the AI to replace the traditional knowledge, they are using it to amplify it.
Or that Jan AI chip in India that's used for monsoon prediction.
Right. And these are often decentralized systems. They're not running on a massive server in California. They are running locally using local context and data. They are being built with the understanding that a monsoon isn't just precipitation data. It's a cultural, agricultural, and spiritual event with deep local meaning.
There was a proverb in that source that I absolutely loved. It was from the Kayapo people in the Amazon. When the axe came for the forest, the tree said, "The handle is one of us."
It's such a powerful and haunting image. The handle is made of wood. The technology that is used to destroy us is so often made of us. It uses our own logic, our own desire for efficiency against us. But the hopeful flip side of that proverb is that we're the ones who can reshape the handle. We can use technology against its own worst tendencies.
We can carve a new handle, a better one.
And this all leads to a final, very practical concept. Artificial Collaborative Intelligence, or ACI.
Not AGI, not the scary, super intelligent artificial general intelligence.
No, ACI, collaborative. The goal here shifts completely. It moves away from automation, the idea of replacing the human to true augmentation that keeps the human in the loop by design. The idea is to use the AI for what it's good at, handling the vast amounts of data, running the optimizations, identifying patterns, but we keep the human explicitly in the final decision-making seat to handle the 5 lenses.
So in that energy grid scenario, the AI would present the brutal option. Cutting power here saves the grid. And the human official, instead of just saying okay and deferring to the machine, says that input is accepted. But we have a hard constraint, which is that we cannot violate the social contract. That is a non-negotiable way. Go back and optimize for shared sacrifice, not just for industrial output.
You force the machine to solve for a harder, more human variable. You force it to respect the banyan tree. You force it to account for the soul. It makes the problem much harder to solve, absolutely. It makes it less efficient in the narrowest sense, but it makes the solution survivable in the human sense.
We have covered a massive amount of ground in this deep dive. We started with a simple breakup text in a coffee shop, And from there, we went through the restructuring of cities and the quiet destruction of community spaces. We watched a brilliant engineer's life's work get crushed by a spreadsheet, and we ended up facing these profound life or death decisions in a frozen mountain range.
Through every single one of those stories, the central thread has been the same. The crisis we're facing isn't that AI is too smart. It's not that Skynet is waking up to kill us, it's that we as humans are mistaking optimization for wisdom. We are handing over the heaviest, most meaningful parts of our lives. The breakups, the city planning, the moral trade-offs, hoping that a machine will give us a clean, painless answer.
But the clean answer is almost always the wrong answer. Or at the very least, it's the soulless one.
It really all boils down to what we choose to value. If we value friction, if we value the messy, complicated, beautiful business of being human, then we have to actively fight for it. We have to insist at every turn that efficiency is not the only God we serve. We have to be willing to be inefficient if that's what it takes to be kind, or to be true, or to be just.
The danger isn't just that the algorithm becomes a leviathan that controls us from the outside. The real danger is that we voluntarily hollow ourselves out to fit its logic. We might find ourselves living in a world that is perfectly optimized, statistically safe, and economically robust. A world where every decision is technically correct, yet where, standing in the middle of it all, we feel like we're watching a stranger live our life, creating a civilization that has survived everything except the loss of its own soul.